Hello, everyone, and I'm happy to welcome our dear panelists today and our audience for this event, The State of Extended Reality, which is our Startup Wise Guys event to introduce the verticals that we work with or invest in. And today we'll be welcoming four esteemed speakers who will introduce themselves in a moment. And Amy Peck from CEO and founder of Endeavor XR will be moderating this discussion. Meanwhile, I'm Andrei Lunev, General Partner XR at Startup Wise Guys. And one of the reasons that we assembled this event today, because we're running a call for applications, and this is the last 6 days to apply to our Startup Wise Guys Extended Reality Pre-Revenue Program for early stage startups. The details of the program I will post in the chat of the event. And please welcome our speakers. Amy, take it away.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, I'm very excited about this chat today. So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce our esteemed panel. We've got Richard Ward, a senior advisor on XR to BCGX, global head of XR at McKinsey for 10 years, and currently an advisor for startups. And I actually love your LinkedIn profile that says, I give advice for free. So reach out to Richard. Christine Perry, who among many other accomplishments, is an analyst and researcher, XR Crowd Advisory Board Chair. She has over 15 years of experience in AR, over 30 plus, not possible, Christine, in emerging technologies. Founder and board member for the AREA, AR for Enterprise Alliance. If you are working in anything to do with AR and want to understand how enterprise works, I highly recommend that organization. They're amazing. And also board member for the Metaverse Standards Forum, which is a new nonprofit dedicated to advancing the open metaverse through standards. And then my friend and former coworker, Dave Haynes, founding partner at FOV Ventures and former director of developer ecosystem and the ViveX program, EMEA at HTC. Well, welcome everyone. It took so long to get through all of your accomplishments.
Awesome, great to be here.
So let's just kind of dive right in. Absolutely. with really sort of a more high level view of the topic today, which is the state of XR. So I'd love to hear from all of you, and we'll just go your top to bottom on my screen here. We're starting with Richard. What are you seeing today, kind of the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of the state of XR overall?
Well, there's certainly things to be happy about, and there's things to be like, hey, why aren't we all, rich on our yachts in Monaco about? And the things to be happy about is the fact that the, excuse me, what I call the 2.5D revolution is in full swing, and this is basically the creation of a pipeline of 3D models inside of organizations. And they push them out, but let's be honest that 99% of the users are going to be using a 2D piece of glass, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone to access it. And IKEA is a great example of that, right? You go to the catalog, you see the thing, there's an object, you can use your thumb and spin it around, in a couple of different directions. And if you have a phone, you can push a button and push it out. And so that 2.5D evolution, if you will, is in full swing. And then as we all end up with nice, fancy, stereoscopic things in front of our eyes, the full 3D revolution, whether it's XR or VR or whatever, will be able to pick up on that. So I'm very happy, but of course I wish it was all here yesterday.
Well, we all do. Christine.
Well, I think the good news is that at least in industrial use cases, these very, very large companies don't need to have XR or VR, AR spelled out for them anymore. They have gotten the message. They're more than interested. The gotcha is that they need to be on their digital transformation journey. They need to be fairly mature or far along in that journey in order to be able to use the digital assets that they have in their enterprise and to use that in context where that user needs it. Now, I think that's the good news. We don't have to explain what XR is. We don't have to talk to them about the benefits as much as we used to. It's always important to remind ourselves about the ROI, but that's pretty much evident. I think one of the difficult situations we find ourselves in now is, as Richard alluded, we don't have see-through hardware that people can put on their faces and wear all day. They can't even choose the hardware that they feel comfortable in, or that seems best suited for their task at an affordable price, and they can't integrate those tools into their enterprise IT. So there's a lot of work left to be done. There's a lot of opportunities ahead, but we don't have all the components.
Excellent. And Dave?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, with my investor lens on, I mean, it's funny, I feel like I do these kind of state of XR panels probably twice a year, and I'm always very optimistic, right? So I'm always the person saying, do you know what? I'm pretty sure this year is the best year to start a company, or, we're just 18 months away from all the conditions being perfect. And, so I'm probably just going to say the same because, I continue to feel that, and I want to find those companies. If you zoom out a little bit, I mean, as a fund, FOV, I mean, FOV stands for field of view, like clearly kind of we're looking for companies in the VR and AR space. But if I step back and maybe lean on Richard a little bit as well, like for us, we see a bigger trend, right? So the bigger trend is more and more of our software information and applications, like moving into this 3D space. And whether that's through a VR glasses or an AR glasses, like that's kind of partly irrelevant, but we just see this shift in compute. And there's a bunch of things behind that. There is XR, there's AI, there's, a number of different technologies that are all converging. But if I zoom out and look at that shift in the way we can compute, that's a 20-year like thing, right? And we're probably, I would say we're maybe in year 6 or 7 of that 20-year journey. So I think as an investor, my job is to understand where we are in the market, not be too optimistic on some areas, but also not be too negative in other areas. And, like you could say, okay, well, we're only 6 years in, maybe I should only have started investing in this space now, but actually I could probably count about 20 companies where I would love to have put some money in, and I would be a very rich man if I'd hit all of those 20 companies. So it might just be that I'm not investing in a AR application for consumer masses with Head 1 AR. It's more like I'm investing into a company like Wave Optics that then sold to Snap for $500 million. So my job as an investor is really just to understand the cycles of where different things are. And, every year there's certain areas that we get really excited about and other areas that we just won't touch because it's maybe too early or too late.
Yeah. And I like the fact that everyone's cautiously optimistic, but I think you're right, Dave. I think all of you are right in the way that you're couching this, is that there's still a long way to go, but there's utility today, and there are ways that companies can leverage the technology to be successful. So this is the state of XR is a pretty broad topic. So I thought we'd kind of drill down and focus on a few specific areas, kind of starting with, hardware, and then software around solutions, game engines, and then investments, what we're seeing in venture and with startups, and then the architecture and infrastructure. I think most important. And consumers, and then what are the use cases? So if we're looking at this as the general topic, why don't we start with hardware? We've seen a lot of companies struggle. There have been a lot of layoffs recently, but there seems to be a lot of investment still. We're hot on the heels of Apple releasing the Vision Pro soon. So, when we look at the hardware, and we all want to get to this, and then the terminology around it. You mentioned, Christine, that we don't have to spell it out, which I think is ironic, since most of the terminology is 2 letters, AR, VR, MR, XR. I'm glad that we don't have to spell those 2 letters out anymore. But now we have, spatial computing. We've been hearing mixed reality.
Oh, we have monocular, we have stereo.
Yes,
we have,
pass through, see through. All of it.
exactly. There's still plenty of terminology that people need to understand in hardware. I don't consider myself to be an expert in the hardware, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt that we need it. I don't think that there's going to be a big adoption of these tools as long as one or both of my hands are occupied or are, now, I personally don't want to start working on AR for knowledge workers. I don't think that's not where my future lies. And I don't think that, I don't want to do games because I don't understand that ecosystem. However, a lot of people do. And there's a lot of people who like to use those experiences, games, or who are knowledge workers today, and we can reach them really easily. We know who they are because they're connected to the internet. But the other people with whom I'm most concerned are those who have to use both their hands all day long. So they need something that is wearable. And I just think it's so ironic that we're all 4 wearing glasses. To the point about the hardware, there have been advances and setbacks, and there will continue to be advances and setbacks. And that's one of the reasons I'm excited about some of the upcoming events. CES, I know there's going to be some announcements and some unveilings and things of new platforms, new hardware form factors. A few months later, there will be more. It'll just keep going like that. What I find discouraging about the whole hardware story is that we have a record or an experience of people standardizing on a piece of hardware and then it's no longer available for a whole variety of reasons. And that cycle of acceptance and then denial, we can't have anymore, is very harmful. So that's one thing to be very cautious about. When one is developing in this ecosystem, you have to be able to develop for all the hardware platforms that are available. And that'll come around a little bit later when I talk about interoperability.
Yeah. And Dave, your time at HTC, you were not focused as much on the hardware, but around the developer ecosystem and then the investment arm. How have you seen this evolution? We don't hear as much about HTC. The hardware is phenomenal. We talk about Meta, people talking about Apple, Magic Leap, and HoloLens. Pass through is sort of the new belle of the ball because it's easier to do. How do you think that's impacting, and how does it impact your investment strategy?
Yeah, so I think hardware, unlike other areas of investment, like hardware has always been a kind of both an enabler, but also a gating factor. I did my first VR investment back in 2016 when, we were it was a company called Wave, and we were trying to get thousands of people into virtual raves. But each of those people had to have a, computer with a fairly powerful NVIDIA GPU. And then when they were dancing around their living rooms, they'd also be literally tethered to their PC. So it was just even though that company was doing amazing things, they ended up having to pivot temporarily to mobile just because distribution wasn't there. So it was just a gating factor. I think the good news for entrepreneurs now is that with VR, you have a much more mature ecosystem, right? So there are now the Quest 3 for me really was a watershed in terms of this is what the kind of mobile standalone VR should be. And it's kind of set a benchmark. This is a quality, high performing device that you can do many different things on that is affordable to any user, right? So that's 2023 for me, and the launch of Quest 3 was like, yes, this is it. And obviously, you know, Pico and HTC, they're all providing like great competition in that market. Next year, what's even more exciting is that like Apple will come with Vision Pro. Now it comes in at a much higher price, but I think that's just raised the bar. I'm not sure I'd call it the iPhone moment for VR just yet. I think that's maybe the second Apple device that they do that's then more affordable to more people. But yeah, I mean, I think as a founder, you're kind of spoiled for choice. You have maybe between 20 to 30 million people with headsets in the market. That's a big enough addressable market, whether you're addressing enterprise or whether it's gaming. So it's no longer a gating factor, but there is a lot to navigate, and it just increases the complexity and go to market for anybody building in this space. The other thing that I'm really excited about, but I think we're only just, it's almost like where VR was in 2017, but we do have a new wave of hardware, right? So we actually have, I was wearing my other Ray-Bans, but I just changed into my Ray-Ban Metas. I have these, they have prescription lenses. This is a device that I now wear on my head maybe like 4 to 5 hours a day, primarily just to take calls when I'm walking around. If I walk my dog, I put my Meta Ray-Bans on. I've all of a sudden got like, you know, always on headphones. Now, I think these things get really excited, but maybe not just because of what we thought the use cases were going to be like. I'm going to have full AR and I'm going to be able to kind of, as I'm walking my dog, I can, you know, be doing object detection, all of this, and it's going to overlay my vision. But actually, I think what you're seeing with things like AI and multimodal AI, and Google just announced their Google Gemini last week, especially for enterprise, that becomes really, really exciting to have these. I won't call them AR glasses. I'll just call them smart glasses. But I think there's a layer of applications that sit on a kind of
They're feature glasses.
Yeah, feature
They're
glasses,
feature
smart
glasses. You have to use your right cell phone terminology, right? They don't do everything the real smart glasses do. They're just feature glasses. They're the bottom shelf at the T-Mobile store.
Yes. But I think what this does, this kind of then unlocks like, well, what does the next like 5 years look like? Because we know that Meta has a roadmap of these devices. So, you know, two more devices up until 2027. And then that gives away in hardware. And so I'll shut up in a minute. But what's exciting then is you also need new input methods for these, right? So we're talking about a bunch of really interesting neural devices, advances in audio. So as a fund, as FOV, we're also investing heavily in like, well, as the hardware progresses, what are the different kind of picks and shovels? What's the different infrastructure that's needed there? So we have a company called DoublePoint, which is kind of pioneering the next kind of wave of human-computer interface. There's companies like, there's a company based in France called Wisear that are doing some really interesting stuff around speechless voice and stuff like that. And then you look at devices like the Humane Pin that were released. I have lots of opinions, both good and bad, about what Humane are doing, but I think there's a next generation of hardware beyond the VR headsets, which is going to kind of take the innovation even further.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's really about interfaces, and you know, Richard, it is true that the feature set. We're seeing also some other devices that are just stripped down that are kind of more purpose driven. I'll throw this out to Richard. Do you think that the more kind of purpose built devices have a little more value in the short term because of low cost and simplicity, or are we just need these magic wayfarers? Richard, I'll send that to you.
Well, so let me back up one step and try to answer the big question first, right? Which is the headphone, the hardware question. I think one of the things that has happened is with the release of the Quest 3 and the Apple device is actually they've done all of us a favor. And we now are going to actually probably stop using terms like XR, MR, AR, blah, 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 blah. Because really what we're going to be doing is we'll be using the terms glasses, goggles, and phones. And the reason being is that, hands up, anybody who thinks that any set of goggles from this day forward will be VR exclusive goggles from now on. Right? From a competitiveness standpoint, every pair of goggles sold from here on out is going to have to be VR and pass-through XR capable. Otherwise, it won't be able to compete in the marketplace. And so, goggles now do both, right? Now, of course, we all know that glasses, which are going to be which are going to be see-through, cannot do VR. Really, they can't do full exclusion out, even with the darkening and all of that stuff. And so I think it's going to start simplifying out some of our conversations about these things, and then aligning kind of the use cases and the value propositions for them in a way that is just it's easier and faster to get to it, so that people don't need to go into this kind of like very heuristic, second semester sophomore year philosophy class on exactly which one's which, and that sort of thing. Which then gets to the other part of it, which is like you talk about customized devices, feature matched versus capability, and those sorts of things. One of the things that you find, or at least that I found in all the work that I've been doing for the last decade, is that the number one driver for whether hands-free computing, and that's really what it is. We're used to the idea of hands-free telephones so that you can drive cars and those sorts of things. Well, hands-free computing, as my little example here in the back is, is the cost of rework. That's the number one driver of if you can pull one of these things together and make it work and if it's worthwhile. And so that's why you find that, for example, satellite manufacturing has 100% gone hands-free computing, because the cost of making a mistake when putting a satellite together is infinite, basically, right? And you can't redo it once you've launched the thing. And that's why you're finding that like the medical, specifically surgery, is going hands-free computing, because the cost of rework is very high. And then you kind of start moving into these other areas. And so certain aspects of things that we're doing in our life, the cost of rework on an automobile at the moment is not expensive enough to make it worthwhile for the entire stack. So the robust hardware, the teaching, the software, the integration, all of that stuff to make it, where it's really worthwhile, because actually the cost per user on this stuff is roughly $100,000 to $250,000 per worker, total cost. To get something like that up and running in a stable, non-proof of concept, but like an actual tool that people use on a daily basis to get their work done. And so you say, well, what problems can justify that level of cost? And you find that it's like, open heart surgery, that can justify the level of cost. Satellite manufacturing, that justifies a level of cost. But,
So,
assembling
Richard,
smartphones does not. Yeah.
I'd like to interject there that I understand the story about rework. I understand these tasks that you're describing that have a very, very high value to someone, right? But I position this a different way. I say that where we're going to get adoption, where that value proposition is undeniable, is where there's a lot of risk. And rework is one form of risk. But there are other risks, risk to life, and that's the healthcare use case. But there's also, risk to materials, risk to equipment or location. Like, if you make a mistake, are you going to blow up the lab? So there are many different types of risk.
The rework is very high.
And yes, exactly.
But in the case of blowing up the lab, the transformer, doing the surgery incorrectly and killing the person, turns out we actually can assign a cost to all of those things, and thus the cost of rework is very, very high in those situations, right? I mean, you kill somebody on the operating table, it's the average payout's about $4.8 million. So,
but I don't know any company that's going to make a living. $4.8 million to not screw it up. But no company is going to. No, I don't know of any company. I don't know. They might be out there who can make a business, a startup that could make a business on the basis of surgery as its only use case. Now, there may be some, but those are going to be some expensive systems, and so I think that while we have to have guidance and we have to give our startups and the ecosystem some benchmarks, like where are the good opportunities, and rework is a nice way to filter that. But there have to be enough of them. There have to be an awful lot of those risky situations and those people in order to justify the development of the growth and the maturation of a technology or a company in that setting. So I don't want to say
Right, but
by
the way
any means that
these two
you're.
things work, but wait, the way these two things, yeah, but the way these two things work is that cost, that roughly $250,000 per worker cost to build, implement, train, maintain, update, all of that of the tech stack for executing, full on XR for tasks will come down with time, right? I mean, that's one of the great beauties of what we do. And so eventually that $250,000 will become $25,000. Then it'll be $12,500, 2,000, it'll
I
go blah, blah,
disagree.
blah, blah, blah.
I-
But it's a case of, well, it's the history of every technology we've ever had as a species.
The
So,
fact the price will go down is not the point on which I disagree. The point I
right,
think
but
is your original premise that it costs
between the
200.
price
I
point
would
and the
One at a
value.
time, you
the
two.
value
Don't make me separate you. All right, Christine.
Yes,
You're going to referee.
what I'm going to say is that one cannot, as part of the return on investment, put the entire cost of digital transformation and digitalization of a company, no matter what size that company is, small or large, you can't put the entire cost of that, all that infrastructure on the benefits of just visualization at the end. The benefits are being accrued through many different channels. So there is a cost, it's very high, but it's very deep. The work that's being done in terms of changing and moving away from paper instructions or from, a truck having to drive to a location to bring that special person or tool there, those are high costs. And so there's, but those costs, the benefits are not just because you were able to visualize. You have to think about it as being the entire stack, and like you spoke of, it has benefits because the parts are ordered ahead of time. There's impacts in supply chain. There's impacts in learning, and we only train people in the things that they need to know, not in everything they might have to know. So there's an awful lot of other ways to bring value from the digital transformation journey than just AR or VR. That's my point. You can't put a whole cost.
There is, and I mean, we add all of those up. Just one final comment. There is, and we add all of those up. All of those, everything you mentioned, we add it all up. And if it doesn't give you roughly a 5 to 15x payout on the investment associated with doing it, it's just not a good economic bet. And as such, whatever cases that that you would like to happen or you think are very valuable, you can add up what the value cost is, look at it against the cost and say, you know what, we need to wait another 15 years before the cost basis comes down to be appropriate, to be an economically reasonable investment in this technology stack. I mean, the same thing, not everything got relational databases in the 90s. It's because it was too expensive, and it ultimately comes down. So anyway, it's just really, it's a case of economics. And so unfortunately right now it's very expensive. That's the problem. And as the costs come down, you'll find that the circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger of all the things that we can apply it to.
Well, and then, you're both kind of talking about two sides of the same coin. Do you see with clients, Christine, you kind of touched on this a little bit, like where the value is. I understand right now we're measuring like very, very specific utility, and it's a math problem. But where I see value is moving the same solution, the same software, the same hardware across multiple business units, because we know we all need visualization, we know we all need collaboration, we know we all need design reviews, training, and so forth. But at least anecdotally, I'm not seeing a lot of that in many organizations. Some, but do you see that kind of cross-pollination so that the L&D group has training, but is it populating across, through marketing, through operations, through other aspects of the organization? Absolutely.
We're doing a project now that's focusing on inspection. And that's it's a use case that we know AR is good for, because you're not only assisting the person who's doing the inspection, but you're capturing what they did and the inspection results. So you can check off that compliance box. And we detected that this was happening, but there was no record of it in sort of the public. People aren't writing blog posts about it or sharing it. And so this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in, is that people who are making incremental use case, they're adding use cases to their long list of already good use cases, are not out there sharing it with the world, because they don't want others to know about their competitive advantage. Having said that, they're not all out at the same level, right? You have some use cases that are at a wide level of acceptance, and you have others that are at a medium level, and some that are still being tested. So I think there's a whole spectrum of use cases, and the deeper and more and wider that companies go, the better. But they got to use the same core 3D maps, the same assets, the same login for an authorization for those users. So there's a lot of opportunity within the XR business that's not directly about visualization. There's a whole lot of other things that are data lakes, different ways, architectures of storing information, making it highly secure so that record of an inspection can be sent to the government if they ask for that level of inspection. So there's an awful lot of I'd say side businesses that we need to encourage and integrate with.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting when we were in Vienna together, which I'm also, as an independent consultant, I'm a big believer in. You said, I don't talk about my clients because even if some information is public, there aren't that many companies really beating the drum, because there are certain still kind of R&D aspects to some of the use cases. And that's part of the challenge, that there's not, no one wants to be first, everyone wants to be second, but there's not a lot of use cases, very public, super successful use cases that companies are promoting. But I do want to shift gears, because without investment, none of this industry happens. And so, Dave, I want to kind of bat it back to you on, it's a different investment strategy than traditional VC. You're not getting your, return in, 3, 4, or 5 years necessarily. There's some outlier, successes, contrary to that. But what is your thesis in going in, and your advice to, some of the other, maybe even angel investors who are looking to get into this space?
Yeah, good question. So I definitely think investing in this space is still non-consensus. And I feel like it has been for the last 7 years that I've been investing in the space. I spend half of my time convincing other investors that yes, this is, or trying to convince other investors that yes, this is a thing. There are still many investors that just well, no, this still seems like a 3D TV. I'm out. You've got to convince me. And I understand some of those cautions. Some of those are investors that have invested previously in a different part of the cycle and are now kind of well, now someone needs to convince me. Others are just people who haven't necessarily experienced the technology themselves. And it's always been the case that it's a technology that you need to experience to understand the possibilities. But I actually don't see it as being too different from any other things that I could invest in. I do think that, we invest in a range of companies, some which we think could easily have, exits in 4, 5, 6 years time, but also some that are going to, go the longer distance. So I actually don't think it's too different structurally. I'd say advice to other investors is that, you just need to kind of be in the industry a little bit more to understand all of the nuances. And as an angel investor, I think you need to kind of understand some of the risks about market timing. Like I said before, I think there's just certain things, because we have this barrier of like hardware development, because this is a new emerging market and new emerging technologies, you maybe just have to have a slightly different expectation on where the risks are. I'd say it's similar, and there's been a lot of talk in the last few months about like deep tech and what is deep tech and what are the different timelines for investing there. And I think maybe it takes a different type of investor with I'd say patience is the main thing. You're not going to have a company that suddenly has, like 1 million users out the gate. Like that's just not how it scales vis-a-vis like some other kind of mobile or software company. But I don't see it as being too different.
So I saw that Andre posted a question about the consumer landscape, and I believe that the sort of consumer day-to-day utility is going to be one of the drivers for enterprises. But I get many differing opinions on whether that's the case. But it does seem to me that consumers, other than gamers, don't really care about the technology. But I'd love to hear from you and see, A, what's it going to take for it to have that day-to-day utility for consumers, and B, is that going to be a driver within enterprise? And let's start with you, Richard.
Oh, absolutely. And it's because I think that, this element of value versus cost. And right now, I pretty much am sure that over the course of the next, I don't know, let's say pick a number, 3 to 5 years, every upper middle class family on the planet will be buying a set of goggles, full XR capable goggles for their children as a supplement to their educational stuff. And the reason is for teaching kids physical skill stuff. It's not learning chemistry. It's not how does physics work or here's ancient Egypt. It's how to play the piano. It's how to hit a baseball. It's all of these kind of other elements that go into, let's say, tactile physical learning for skills and capabilities. Absolutely. You see this already. In fact, there's a couple of startups that are very successful right now, specifically focused on individual sports. There's one for baseball and there's one for football in the United States. The one for football, all it does is it teaches kids how to throw a pass over and over and over. And they're just knocking it out of the park. And if you've ever watched American children's sports, the amount of money poured into that stuff, it will astound you, right? And as such, for those people, if they think that buying let's for argument's sake, say a $500 headset and software package is going to improve the performance of the kid in something, they absolutely will do that. And they start throwing that into playing piano and learning how to, I don't know, whatever. I mean, all the things that kids learn how to do. So I think that from the AR side of it is that the consumer side of it, absolutely, this is going to be a big market, but I don't think it's going to be for the educational things that a lot of people have been focusing on, which is like, what was the Roman Colosseum like back in the day and that type of stuff.
Good. Well, hopefully we can move from everybody gets a trophy to, people actually deserve a trophy with training and work. So I want to talk about standards, because that's one of the other elements that, sometimes is just the last thing people think about. But thankfully, the industry has been focused on this. And Christine, you've been looking at standards since the beginning and interoperability. It's a thankless job. I'm going to thank you now. Can you talk about the Metaverse Standards Forum and some of the work you're doing and how people can help?
Right. So it's not a particularly sexy topic. It's not a good thing to invest in. At least it depends on what your goals are. So I think that what we've got here is too many finite, narrowly defined outlets for creativity, for content. And so what I mean by this is that people will create an app or create some type of an experience or some system targeting a device and one piece of software. They want to release that app on the App Store or something like that, or they want to sell it to a company to solve a very, very specific problem. And while on the one hand that's good, what it fails to do is give the customer a lot of choices about what platform they might choose. So this is one of the problems. The way our ecosystem is designed now is people design content, they publish it or produce it and release it for a specific device. And there are experience stores and places that you can go and download that. And that's for the consumer as well as for the industrial. I think that there needs to be ways for the publisher of information, be that an internal IT organization or an artist, independent artist, that there needs to be ways for that content to be available to anybody, regardless of the device that they're using. So that's a choice, and we don't have enough of those choices. And I can give other examples of why interoperability is important. But in essence, there's another concept which is fundamental, which is that if we have a baseline of interoperability at the hardware level or operating system level, then people can start innovating on top of that instead of innovating below the content delivery level and down in further and further down into the stack. So I'm a proponent of having, for example, OpenXR implemented in every piece of hardware that's ever going to be released, because that removes the need for the application developer to understand how to control the hardware, how to discover the capabilities of that device, and then to build on top of that to make the best experiences for the choice that the customer has made. So I think there's a very, very good way to view interoperability and standards specifically. OpenXR is one, GLTF for the assets that are stored and transmitted. There are many other opportunities where we can get a bonus or a boost because the developer does not have to reinvent the wheel every single time. So that's I'll stop with that for the moment.
Excellent. No, and it is important. It also kind of is very much on the Web3 landscape mind as well, and those are definitely intertwined. When we talk about deep tech and the breadth of technology, how is the new darling of technology, AI and generative AI, specifically Gemini, apparently their Alpha 2 product can now code better than I think it was 84% of developers. How
I'm glad I'm not a coder.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's not only coding faster, but it's also uncovering redundancies in code that make software much more laggy. And so how do you see that fitting in? And I'll talk to you. I'll start with you, Dave, because I think it also plays into the investment piece. Is that going to? I think it's obviously going to accelerate the industry, but in what ways that maybe we're not thinking of?
Yeah, so I mean, I think AI has been around for a while. I think certainly things like computer vision has been crucial to where we've got to with some of the both the AR and VR headsets. But I think what's been really exciting this past year has just been the rapid development of generative AI and LLMs, and just our ability to kind of, once we've seen something through our glasses or our headsets, to be able to kind of cognitively understand and reason around those across videos, text, images, audio, etc. So it does feel like we're at the cusp of something really exciting. One area that we've been investing against in generative AI is just the ease at which content creators can now create content, right? And that's both for consumer and enterprise applications. Before, anything where you're trying to simulate something in 3D, there's just a lot of to get the content that we need. It's you've got teams there, you've got big 3D artist teams that are having to generate these simulations and kind of painstakingly create the 3D assets and stuff like that. So we've invested in a few companies like Scenario and a few others where this is basically now making that content production much easier. very helpful for enterprise, but also in consumer. So that's one area that we're really excited about, UGC content creation, but just also assisting professional content creation. The other big area then is just around everything around GPT and the LLMs, and especially this kind of multimodal AI, which I think the Gemini demo, if anyone hasn't seen the Google Gemini demo, I would definitely just go and like switch on and kind of understand that. From an investor perspective, it's also quite interesting because it is becoming an accelerant for more investment in this space. So it's great that there's people who may not have invested in this space, but because it has the sheen of AI, or it's suddenly AI is an unlock for it to be able to do more things, that has attracted more investor interest. And I think at AWE this year, you know, Ori Imbar went on stage, and you know, his big thing is that, well, actually what XR is the interface for AI, etc. So there is that whole movement. I would say one word of caution. I think we're still very early in the innings. Like a lot of people got very excited about VR in 2017. A lot of money went in, and then everyone stood back and said, yeah, okay, well, it's not possible to solve all the world's problems with VR. I think the same is happening a little bit with AI. We've seen the demos, we've scratched the surface of what it can do. I think it's going to take, you know, another 2, 3, 4 years, both for that technology to mature, but also then for the enterprises and consumers to understand what it can actually do and where it can be really helpful. Like most of us are probably using AI to help us, you know, slightly change the text on our blog posts, or we might, you know, use Midjourney to create some funny things, but, you know, to do the things that really kind of transform and bring a lot of value in our lives, I think there is still a kind of 2 to 3 year just kind of maturation of some of those base technologies. But yeah, we are wildly excited about it, and I think it's just another element of this like huge shift that we have in today's compute.
But do you think, though, that, you know, I think the fundamental difference, though, the way we were looking at, you know, VR and even AR subsequently relative to AI, especially generative AI, like it's the barrier to entry is low, and it's something that people can use every day. And that's something that we don't necessarily have with AR and VR yet. But you know, do you see, you know, the two technologies working in concert to fast track that day-to-day utility so that we start to tip over more adoption? And again, this is the piece where I think consumers will drive it, because if we start finding ways to combine AI with visualization or just our day-to-day tasks, especially around AR, that then we're going to take it to work with us. But I'm sure there's some other aspects that, you know, that we haven't really touched on yet. So
yeah, I do have something to add on that. I think one of the areas that I think is exciting is scene segmentation, that is understanding the scene that the user has and the context of that user. That's not generative AI, and it is machine learning, but it's not an LLM. So those kinds of technologies are absolutely fundamental, and we are seeing them improve by leaps and bounds right now. Understanding what's going on at an intersection, or understanding what's going on in a larger space, you know, a factory floor, by having all these cameras understand their shared environment. That's not generative AI, but it is taking advantage of the new compute, the types of compute that we have, the fact that they're not on our devices, that they are just far enough away that they can be very power consuming and very, very powerful for us. I think in the generative side, I think it's more about, you know, how we went from Web 1.0 to 2.0, and it was like I could type in some text and I could publish it, WordPress, right? I think that is where understanding what the individual wanted to put into the world is generative AI, understanding that and then generating that. Eventually it will become automatic, or Anticipatory is the word I like to use, so that the system anticipates what my needs will be and then will generate the route that I need to follow, or awareness about how to evacuate from a place that I might need to leave and I have no other map or anything. There's 100 ways in which my last minute, my current need is different than anybody else's, right? And that's generative AI, which that's saying, I'm going to create for you just what you need right now. This image or these arrows that are going to point you towards the left or to the right, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of there are definitional issues, but there's a lot of ways that it can be used.
But that's an interesting point, around being predictive, because you look at Neom, instead of calling what they're building a smart city, they're calling it a cognitive city, and that's exactly the concept. Richard, you had a comment?
Well, so I think the real big value unlock for XR and AI is what you see behind me, which is YouTube has 2.4 billion hours of procedural instruction videos. And the thing is that an AI, what you see behind you, it has the full physical context of what is being done, as well as the precise, viewable from multiple angles, procedural instructions for what needs to be done. And this could be getting your coffee machine at home to work when the red light starts blinking. It could be changing the oil on this particular car. It could be whatever. And of course, the thing is that once you then have, a XR device, whether it's pass-through or see-through, that can do the full referencing alignment, what I think the big unlock will be is shoving this 2 billion hours worth of instructional procedural video that we already have captured, expertise, and turning it into 3D models and XR capable content that when I put on this thing and I get the contextualization stuff lined up, I really can see how to change the oil on a 1955 ACAs. And I can tell you it's a lot harder than it looks. Right. And so that is a thing that right there, currently, I have to mostly farm this out to some mechanic for a couple $100, and I really would like not to. Right. And so for me, that's going to be the big unlock between the whole AI generational business and what we think in XR is the fact that it's going to be able to convert all of this stuff, whether it's splats or it's whatever, but it gets it from 2.5D, which is the contextualization, to full 3D. And then we get the physical spatial referencing so that I, as a human being, can then get the answers to what I need to my specific problem in front of me, because the knowledge is there. I mean, everything you ever want to do in life is on YouTube. It's just figuring out how to translate it into your context.
I just want to jump in, but just to back to Christine's point. So actually, just to be clear, that the generative AI piece, so Google Gemini is their latest generative AI model, right? But it's just that it's multimodal. So 2 examples, if I have these AR glasses on, if I'm looking at the plate that I'm eating and I'm eating a plate of nuts, well, before with computer vision, the machine would understand, these are some nuts. It would do the scene segmentation. It would look up and be like, right, I've seen some nuts. Where the generative AI comes along is kind of adding the reasoning. It's like, I can then ask it, like, should I eat these nuts? And it would say, well, Dave, these nuts have this many calories. Like, these are the ethical reasons why these nuts might have been fun. Like, it has the rest of the internet to understand then, what are the contextual implications around the nuts. Or if I'm in an enterprise setting and I have these glasses on or some other type of glasses on, I can look at some screws and it can say, I understand this is this type of screw. Well, in order to be able to put this screw into this hole, you're actually going to need this type of screwdriver, and it can be looking up the world's instruction manuals and everything. So it's the fact that we can now kind of combine this scene understanding and then kind of be able to reason with all of the other kind of inputs and information that's out there into something novel. And I think that's really exciting. One question I have as a startup investor is like, well, what is the best way now for, if I want to invest against that, new unlock, how do I do that? Because the big tech incumbents is just most of the value going to accrue to Google, or can I invest in a company that is going to inject very specific knowledge or kind of manage that interface for a very specific type of work? So we're really fascinated. We'd love to, if there's anyone kind of, on in the audience who has some views on that. This is still very early. So as investors, we're kind of super keen to hear how startups specifically think they're going to be able to leverage that and make big businesses out of it.
Yeah, and I saw that Andre had posted a question similar to that, which is, looking at both the investment landscape or even just what the opportunities are. What do you see with this landscape and the breadth of technology that's available now, especially with generative AI? Where would you invest, or where do you see that companies should be investing their resources? And let's go down the top to bottom again, Richard.
I think exactly what I said. I mean, if they've got all this procedural and contextual information for what they're doing, the ability to use the Gen AI to turn it into XR capable technology, content, that will drop the price point down 10x right there. So from, let's say, $250,000 to $25,000 per worker, and all of a sudden, then the number of problems you can apply it to is just expanded geometrically. And that's kind of starts pushing these things down. That's why I'm very optimistic. The costs will keep coming down. And here's a perfect example of content creation costs, really more content conversion costs rather than raw creation being, a great benefit for us all.
And Dave.
I'm going to answer the question slightly differently. We haven't really touched on it during the course of the questions. But I think one interesting thing for the upcoming Startup Wise Guys program is this will be kind of the first program once Vision Pro has been released. This is the Apple device. I haven't used it yet. Everybody I've spoken to who has used it has been very excited. Still very early, like distribution will be in kind of tens or hundreds of thousands of units, not millions of units. And I think it won't be until device 2 that the market really takes off. But this is a really magical time. You have a brand new device. You have a player like Apple who wants to invest. So I would love to see people in the audience thinking about how they can build a new company and be kind of first to market on Vision Pro. And I think the Startup Wise Guys program is probably a very good place to do that, because the Vision Pro will have a lot of kind of enterprise customers. So yeah, please apply with those ideas to the XR program, and we will be following along closely. And I'd love to find investments from this upcoming batch.
And Christine, you can close us out with your final thoughts.
I think it's great that AI is the darling right now. I have absolutely enjoyed watching what's been released so far, and I look forward to seeing the future. But AI, by another name, has been used in AR for years, a part of computer vision. So I feel like, everybody's getting on the bandwagon, but the horse has already left the barn. We've been using it for a really long time. And I think the opportunities to invest are really exciting. I don't agree about investing on the Apple Vision Pro. I would give that another year. I think that it's going to be exciting to see what Samsung and Google release next month at CES. There's been talk about it already, and I want things that are video see-through, not video pass-through.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a lively, amazing discussion. Thanks to all of you, and also to Startup Wise Guys for hosting this. And I'm going to pass it back to Andre. Thanks so much, everyone.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and perspectives, because it was a really diverse discussion with really different entry points on the how to look at the ecosystem. And I kind of trying to agree and accumulate with all of you because on one side, it's important to see ahead, especially for the early stage where myself and Dave operates right now. So indeed, like prototyping for Apple Vision Pro and new devices on the market. And actually, Quest 3 is a decent alternative to Vision Pro if we take out the Apple ecosystem out of that equation. Like technically, those devices seem to be delivering really good user experience. So indeed, if you're working on either developments of those, please do apply. My personal take is that I believe that's because enterprise adopting it now and consumers still has like certain friction. It's better to iterate on the existing use cases in that environment, because the iteration is what makes perfectness. And going back to the purpose of this program, all those seasoned experts are mentors actually in our program in one capacity or another. So I encourage you to apply for the program. It is a really dynamic program and dynamic application process in terms of we are closing applications on December 14th, next Thursday, next week. So you have roughly less than a week to do your final decision and basically click the button. And the program itself will start mid-January and will guide you through 8 weeks of curated content that includes also some XR-specific content. So please find the links in the comments and follow Startup Wise guys here, and we're happy to answer your questions over chat or messages. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. We're still
Do we
live.
leave the studio or do we stay?